And welcome back to CentralCoastRadio.com. Well, we're going to launch a brand new segment on the show now. This new segment is called Be Kind, Rewind. And what we're going to do during this segment is, from time to time, one of us that's part of the Subculture team is going to go back and have a look at a film that we like, or maybe sometimes it'll be a classic film and we'll talk about why we don't like it. But basically, we'll go back in time and take a look at a film that's been out for a while and discuss the film. Now, today the film I want to take a look at, and you might be wondering why did we call it Be Kind Rewind? Well, in the old days, for the younger people out there, whenever you hired a video, I should say, VHS, it would always say Be Kind Rewind. So that's why we thought we would call this, because we're going back in time to look at a film. Now, the film that I went back in time and looked at this week was the MEG, which, strangely enough, in some countries is just called MEG. But why did I go back and take a look at it? Because the MEG 2 comes out in cinemas this week, so I wanted to prepare myself for that. But one of the things I remembered about this film before I went back to watch it was how much I loved it. This film kind of came out and was almost considered cheesy or kind of almost a novelty action film. It was really being promoted as this is Jason Statham against a big shark. But when I watched this film, I found myself really, really liking it to the point where I was like, there's more in this film than what they're giving it credit to, especially in the first quarter. For those that don't know the film, it centers around a deep sea rescuer called Jonas Taylor, played by Jason Statham, who is on the outer with that community after years before claiming that when he was on a deep sea rescue, they were attacked by this huge shark, the Megalodon. People didn't believe him to the point where Heller, who is a doctor on these kinds of missions, played by Robert Taylor, described him as crazy. And as a result, Jonas has kind of moved to Thailand and sits around drinking all day. It is a interesting film because that concept alone is actually pretty interesting, and all of that's happened to Jonas has caused a lot of things to happen. His relationship with his wife Laurie, played by Jessica McNamee, broke up, and he's become kind of a recluse. Now, there's a new mission that is going on. It's being funded by Morris, played by Rainn Wilson, and it's the idea of Zhang, played by Winston Chow. Now, his idea is that what we know as the trench in the ocean, that the bottom of the trench is not actually the bottom, that it's actually a gas at the bottom, and if you go through that, there is something else there. Now, he sends down a crew to do that, led by Laurie, and they break through and find that his theory is true. But once they've done that, they are attacked pretty much straight away. In response to that, Suin, played by Bingbing Lee, heads down to check out what's happened and becomes trapped as well. So soon Mac, played by Cliff Curtis, and Zhang are going to try and get Jonas to come back and help. At first he's reluctant, but then reluctantly agrees to come. Of course, that means that he has issues with Heller again, who is on this mission, but they let him down, and yeah, no spoilers of what happens with the rescue mission, but let's say that they do discover that the Megalodon is real, and suddenly Jonas's thoughts from the past are justified. Now, this is where I think this is a movie in two parts, because I would argue that the first half of this film is a lot better than the second half. In the second half, John Turteltaub kind of turns it into that kind of movie where it's like a Jaws film where the Megalodon is attacking people on a beach and they've got to keep these people safe. And I think in the second half of this film, it does lose some of that suspense that's there in the first half. The first half of this film is all about scientific exploration. It looks at things like corporate greed with the character of Morris. Like, he wants to push ahead with things no matter how dangerous it is because he's put billions of dollars into this. And then, of course, it's his ridiculous actions that end up with this megalodon out and eating humans at beaches and things like that. So, the structure of the film, it's interesting. Like I said, the first half of this film is a true suspense kind of film. Like, if you think back to Kristen Stewart's film Underwater a few years ago, it's very much in that vein of things. But then the second half of this film almost becomes the cheesy kind of action film that it was pitched and labelled. But I think what keeps this film interesting all the way through are the characters. Like, I mentioned some of the characters before, and of course there's a romantic interest that kind of develops between Jonas and Soo-in. There's also a great friendship that begins between Mei Ying, played by Shua, Sophia Kai, the little girl who is Soo-in's daughter, and Jonas and her start off this friendship that just builds as the film goes on. You also have characters like Jax, played by Ruby Rose, and DJ, played by Paige Kennedy, and The Wall, played by Oliver Dari Olafsson, and they all have characterization. That's one thing that you can't fault the writers with on this film, is giving characters characterization. I do think in the second half of this film, though, that especially for Jonas, that characterization falls away a little bit. At the start of this film, there's a real interest in him about this guy who is the best at his job, but has lost that job because of the fact that nobody believes him with what he's seen. But in the second half of the film, Jonas basically just becomes the action hero that's there to go after the shark. But look, I still even find those parts interesting in the film. I think I love the second half, the first half of the film more than the second half, but I still argue that this is a good film when people say, oh, it's a cheesy kind of film. It's a film that I enjoy, like, and I think people forget that sometimes for cinema, that even as a film journalist, I like to enjoy a film, and sometimes I might give 5 stars to a movie that I don't enjoy as much as a film like The Meg, and that's simply because, yeah, I think the other film is a better film, but I enjoy sitting down and watching something like The Meg. I'm very much a child of the 80s and 90s, so therefore I love action films, I love genre films, so sometimes I'll grade a film like this a little bit higher than what most other people would because I enjoyed it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with enjoying a film. So if you're heading out to see The Meg 2 in the next couple of weeks, sit down and watch The Meg again. Get to know some of the characters here. Get to know Jonas as a character, because hopefully, and I'll be able to tell you next week, but hopefully the second film follows the first half of this film more so than the second half. But go back and have a look at The Meg. It's our first film that we're looking at on Be Kind Rewind. But go back and have a look at The Meg and watch that first half particularly, and see that this film was a little bit more than what a lot of people thought it was going to be because of that kind of seriousness in that first half. But at the end of the day, this is just Jason Statham versus a shark, and if you go into the film expecting that, you're going to get that. So go back and have a look at The Meg. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 at the time, and I stay by that. 3.5 out of 5 is what this film deserves. Go back and have a look at The Meg.